Welcome to Elevated Mission Channel's Ruggles Round Up, where we talk about everything sports, pretty much football. I mean, because that's what we know that not only we want to hear about, you do too, because we love to get into everything NFL right now because this preseason is super interesting to me. I think this season's going to be super exciting. You know that we didn't really have this kind of build up last year, but we're going to dive into all these things. I think Ian has grabbed some Vegas stats as far as where they're predicting win and loss percentages, or I should say wins and loss records, and we're going to give just our who we think's going to be hotter than the actual what they're predicting, and who's going to be colder, and some of those kind of things. Well, I'll turn it over to Ian, our Vikings expert up north, and let you jump in here, Ian.
Well, we are back trying to talk a little bit about some hot teams, some cold teams, and just about where Vegas views these teams heading into this NFL season. Super excited as we got some teams that we very much disagree with what Vegas's opinion is on them. But some of these teams that we're going to be predicting, which teams are predicted to make the playoffs, which we don't necessarily think might make these playoffs, or the
Right.
teams that are predicted not to make the playoffs that we think could make that push to make a first round bid.
There's
But
that every
I'll
year,
start off.
right? I mean,
Yeah, there's every year where a cold team, where a team you're like, no way they win more than 6 games, ends up winning, 12 to 10 games. But we'll start off with the cold teams, and then, because it's way more fun to talk about the teams that might be making a big push. My
absolutely.
pick for it is kind of the hot take of the teams as Buffalo Bills. They're predicted right now at 10 and a
Woo.
half wins. Obviously, everyone loves them, a bit of Bills action. Josh Allen is an exciting player. But with the removal of Brian Dable, I think there's going to be a continual decline with that team. Stephon Diggs is kind of looking to be more and more of an issue within that locker room. And I think that the Buffalo Bills season may be taking a downhill turn due to some of those factors. And I see them probably making still the first round of the playoffs, but maybe not in the dominating fashion that a lot of other people expect them to.
Yeah, last year I didn't think they really got their offensive identity ever on track, and it really ended up hurting them down the road as they got into the playoffs, and they really bowed out a lot quicker than I think any of us thought they would. But you just really see the need for a top tier offensive coach to be on the staff. So if you've got a defensive minded head coach, you got to have that super productive OC that really can help your quarterback and your receivers in particular, especially when your run game is Josh Allen, really to shine the way that we all expect them to do.
Oh yeah, I mean we watch it as the Giants took a huge step this past year, especially on the offensive side of the football. As Daniel Jones looked like a viable starter, he got that big contract from the Giants, for his great play, and he kind of I think put a lot of that credit towards Brian Dable and
Yeah.
how he's affected that Giants offense as well as that Bills offense prior to that. As we saw that step back, hopefully, I know I wish the best for as Josh Allen, as I think he's so talented.
Oh,
But I
amazing
do
player.
see that team kind of falling apart in certain ways, especially with how lenient they are. No, how much they lean onto Josh
Oh,
Allen,
yeah.
I should say, as they just lean so heavily on him being the pass game, the run game. I don't see that working out for a multitude of years. If he gets injured, there's no way that team makes the playoffs. And so I think, I see the Buffalo Bills maybe not as that 10.5 win team, as right now Vegas sees them as the fifth best team in the entire NFL.
Plus, you got a division there where the Jets taking huge steps forward. They're already a 7-win team last year without a true number one quarterback. You've got the Dolphins, in theory, if Tua is healthy all season, that's a tough 2 games as well. And Patriots, always, you got, Belichick over there dialing up really good defense, getting nice pressure on quarterbacks. He's always going to be able to do that no matter what kind of squad he's got. And so, it's a tough division. And so if you're not playing your best ball, it's just going to be a long season. That's for sure. So if Josh Allen got hurt, I just don't see a pathway there either. So I agree with that take. That's a good one for sure. Well, the one that I see is they've got Dallas Cowboys with 9.5 wins. And I'll tell you what, the more the Cowboys lean on Dak Prescott, the worse he seems to play. I mean, you take last year, they leaned more heavily on him, and he led the league in interceptions, you know. So I just don't like, you lose Kellen Moore. He's over with the Chargers now. You got to lean more heavily on Dak Prescott. His offensive line continues to degress, right? They lost some other key pieces on that offense. So you got just some challenges there, and I don't see them, being a playoff team really. And again, another tough division. You got, the team that went to the Super Bowl last year and lost in a close game with the Eagles. And I think the Eagles might even take a step further down that pathway towards a great team.
Yeah, I think it's going to be one of the toughest divisions to be a part of for the Cowboys, especially going up against those Eagles multiple times in a year. They're going to be a just hard team to deal with. And then the Cowboys, they have probably the least talented roster, in my opinion, that they've had over the last few years of me watching them over the Dak Prescott time, him being the starting quarterback, as they've just had loaded wide receiver rooms, running back rooms, defenses have been up and down, but, they have had some pretty good defenses with him as well. And I think the more you look at it reliant on him, and it's not the rookie Dak Prescott with all that talent around him anymore. And you got to be, okay, Dak Prescott, you got to make this guy work that was a 5th-round draft pick wide receiver as your wide receiver 3, not CeeDee Lamb as your wide receiver 3 or Michael Gallup as your wide receiver 3. And so having that kind of improvement from Dak Prescott will be huge for their season if they want to be that 9.5 win team. If they're not, if Dak Prescott doesn't take that jump, there's no way I can see that coming into play.
No, I'm seeing film coming out of training camp. Dak has not looked good. A lot of times you look over years and you say, okay, training camp, maybe not that big a deal. They'll get that all ironed out and worked out. I think it's actually worse because he led the league in interceptions and he's thrown a bunch of picks in training camp. I don't like the optics of that. You also see a little disrespect. I mean, here's a guy that we all think of as a great leader, Walter Payton, man of the year, Dak Prescott, just a good guy, and he's getting disrespect from his DBs, so like he doesn't seem to be in total control as the leader of the team, and they got to lean on him. He doesn't have as much talent around him, and he doesn't have his OC anymore. I just don't like where they're headed, as a franchise right now. We'll see, because Cowboys, rich tradition, rich history, but we'll see what happens this year. I'm a sell on Dak Prescott, which makes me a sell on the Cowboys. And, a lot of people even compare him because statistically he's almost identical to Kirk Cousins, but Kirk Cousins has done it with poor offensive lines, and Dak's been able to have the luxury of having great offensive line, good running behind him, and just, kind of being able to lean on that with great wide receivers on the edges. And I just don't think he's going to have that luxury at all this year. So we'll see where that's all at, but that's my cold team this year.
Yeah, I think that's going to be an interesting one. I think the Cowboys are always one of those teams that you're like, are they going to be good? Are they going to be bad? Always questioning on what America's team is going to do next. But let's move on to some of these hot teams, as the Vegas got them as low win odds in this season. But for us, we personally see them improving from these win odds. I'll go with mine first, as the Tennessee Titans were listed by Vegas at 7.5 wins. I do not see that happening due to the getting DeAndre Hopkins is that huge add, because we've seen that offense with a number 1 wide receiver. And I think the number 1 wide receiver is the second most individual important position in the football field behind the quarterback. If you're talking about a group, an offensive line is very important on a team as well, and I consider that right behind the quarterback. But the number 1 wide receiver, when you're talking about an individual player, is probably the second most impactful player on the offense. And getting DeAndre Hopkins cannot be understated on how important that is for that Tennessee Titans offense to fully work as a whole, because that takes pressure off of those number 2 wide receivers, number 3 wide receivers, and also makes that defense have to take a step back so that Derrick Henry can go and get that little room to run, so he can start knocking over linebackers like he once was. And so I think there was just too many people in the box for him. Get those teams out of the box, get those defenses out of the box, and you'll see those Tennessee Titans offense just boom in production.
Absolutely. I think that I love that pick. I think that's a good thing. You got a good coach. You got a good quarterback. Well, he's at least a serviceable quarterback in that system there, and you've got a running back and a wide receiver, so that you've got all the pieces for a nice step forward after a little bit of a down year. So I like that pick a lot.
Yeah, I've seen DeAndre Hopkins work with worse quarterbacks than Ryan Tannehill. That's for sure.
For sure.
Over with Houston, he had to work with quite a few poor quarterbacks, and I think he made it work. I think Ryan Tannehill will be loving tossing it up to one of the best contested catch guys in the entire NFL.
100%. I think Ryan Tannehill, with a good wide receiver out there, a nice running game behind him, he can look again like he did a couple of years ago, where he's in his sweet spot, he's comfortable, and he's able to play the way that he knows how to play. And
Yeah,
so I don't think he's out of it. Yeah.
point guard playing play action off of Derrick Henry is a beautiful place to be at for Ryan Tannehill. That's 100% sure. But let's talk about your team, as your team is predicted to have even less wins than the Tennessee Titans, who are listed at 7.5.
Absolutely. My team only is predicted to have 6.5 wins, but they just won a Super Bowl a couple of years ago, and that's the Los Angeles Rams. But they're coming off a season where they had both Matthew Stafford and Cooper Kupp injured. Those guys look to be ready to go this year. So I expect a huge comeback with those guys. And as long as those two can stay healthy, I think you can expect good things for the Rams. They got a great offensive mind in McVay. And so the Rams, I think, are definitely being undersold. I think they're a huge step up from where they've been. That might be a hot take, but I actually think they'll compete for a playoff spot.
Oh, I mean, it's hard to say it won't happen, as you can point at the defense being as lackluster as you want. Aaron Donald not being as dominant as a player as he once was. You might say those things as well. But when we get to the bare bones of it, it's an offensive league, and so when
Yeah.
you have the one of the best wide receivers, arguably the best wide receiver in the NFL with Cooper Kupp. I think he's right up there in the arguments with the Tyreek Hills, Justin Jeffersons of the world. And then you get Matthew Stafford, when he has Cooper Kupp, is arguably in the top 10 of quarterbacks. That's a combo that gets you into the playoffs on a very regular basis. Me and you, we talk about building teams all the time, and quarterbacks and coaches are the two ways to for sure win games. And McVay and Matthew Stafford is a combo that will for sure win you games. I think 6.5 wins is underselling a lot of what the potential that Ram team has.
Yeah, it's such an easy over for me on that one. I mean, I'm being a little bold maybe by saying they'll make the playoffs, but I don't really think so if they're healthy. And that's the biggest challenge for the Rams. I think that if you lose Stafford or Cup, then the drop off is pretty dramatic. You got some teams that are pretty solid, like, in their skilled positions after one, right? Like you look at that Jets, especially with what they've done here in the offseason, that Jets skilled position group, and you go, wow, the number two guy is almost, right behind number one, those kind of things out at the wide receiver, those kind of areas.
49ers, another great
49ers, another
example of
one.
that.
Yeah. Where it
Yeah,
doesn't really
George
drop
Kittle
off.
finally gets 10 targets a game instead of getting his 4 targets that he's been getting.
We got a guest in the studio, so it's awesome to have him coming in. And yeah, Studio 13, like I tell you, it's just crazy. There's some child actors here filming some commercials, but well, it's always good to have one of the local stars stop in. So
Well, talking about Los Angeles Rams and being able to build a team that's a winning franchise and having the quarterback, I think that's kind of a perfect transition into our next topic, and that's talking about winning football teams and teams that we view as building those winning rosters with quarterbacks, with coaches, as those are the two main mixers. But there are other pieces to this that do go with this as well, as you can have a defensive-minded head coach work well if he's got that dominant offensive coordinator. You got, offensive minded head coaches, but they need a kind of head coach personality at the defensive coordinator position to lead that defense. What are some of those teams that you're looking at of maybe coming up, or they already have solidified that really good winning mentality.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's some easy picks in there. They're good year in and year out. And first off, they set a great culture, right? So you got to have great culture on a not just a football team, on any business, on anything that's going to be successful as an organization. You got to have that culture. But then you definitely have to have those key pieces within your organization that make, whatever the particular industry go. And right now in the NFL, that particular key positions are quarterbacks and the offensive minded either head coach or a very prominent offensive coordinator. You could say in years past it was a running back and defense. That defensive coordinator had to be that guy that we now talk about with the offensive coordinator. The league has changed. It's not 1980. It's not 1990s anymore. Now, well, we talked about this before, Ian, that the wide receiver used to be just like the frosting, on the cake. And now they are actually part of the cake. And maybe the running back is the frosting because it's the league has changed, right? And so the way
Oh,
the rules
absolutely.
are
I
at
can
and all
come
that.
into the whole entire question that I proposed to you before this broadcast was, would you rather have Darius Slayton and Saquon Barkley or Justin Jefferson and Alexander Madison? I think everybody in the NFL is choosing Justin Jefferson and Alexander Madison, even though
Sure.
Saquon Barkley is so multidimensional, one of the most dynamic backs we've seen come into the NFL over the last 5 years, and he's one of those guys that you definitely want on your team. But Justin Jefferson is arguably top three running back, wide receiver in the NFL. You're taking that over top of the running back, even though back in the day the running back was the more touted position. Now it's that wide receiver one.
Well, that's the only reason, like the Vikings would have let Cook go, right? I mean, now you got Dalvin Cook wearing a Jets jersey. You would have never seen that in years past, and they never would have let that guy go. They would have paid him whatever it took because you had to have that dominant running back. And Dalvin Cook still has some tread on the tire. I mean, he's I think still in peak, Dalvin Cook running back mode for at least another year. So you would have never seen that that go in years past. But now Justin Jefferson, the bigger deal in that equation, and there's no doubt about it. So there's some definite. I mean, everyone's going to talk about Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. He's so dominant as a quarterback, though, Patrick Mahomes, that it's kind of an anomaly. So I'm going to leave that off to the side, because I think that you can get a little lost in the sauce. Although I think Andy Reid is probably the best offensive mind in the league at this time. Just so much experience, so much time. He's so comfortable in his system, and he's working so well with his players that it's just a well-oiled machine. But he's really got some nice luxury with Patrick Mahomes. So kind of leave that to the side. But you've got a lot of examples of this. I mean, even take a good example of the hot team right now. Everybody's talking about the Detroit Lions. You've got Dan Campbell setting a great culture there in Detroit, right? They're trying to bite kneecaps, and they just want to do just take the hill, right, for the team, and they just want to get out there and go. But you got to have that offensive coordinator, and Ben Johnson is providing that. And he decided that he liked the culture so much, he stayed when he probably could have got a head coaching opportunity during the last offseason. And then you've got Jared Goff that played really as a top, 10 for sure, but maybe even a top 8, 7, 8 quarterback in the league last year. And in the NFC, really probably a top 2 quarterback after Hurts, over there with Philadelphia. So you really got a nice combination right there. And they just keep building that culture, keep that going. They've got that offense really humming. They've done some things in the offseason to probably even increase that as well. They get a wide receiver with Jameson come off that the gambling issues that he had, and then they're gonna have that lid lifter also for the rest of the year after that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of reasons to be up on the Lions. They've built up a lot of the reasons why we talk about being a good team. Like I said, one of the most important, one of the most effective of all positions is the offensive line. They went and built up a great offensive line
Right.
to be able to protect Jared Goff, which he needs that because he's not going to be scrambling around all over the place. He's going to be sitting still in the pocket and throwing it out to those guys. They got their number one wideout with Amon-Ra St. Brown, building up that defense is going to be their number one priority. And that's going to be the question: can they build a team that without that defensive minded guy? I guess this is a real test of today's mentality of football. As you look at the Lions, and even Dan Campbell, he's got a mentality of a defensive guy. He was a tight end.
Right.
He's in the NFL, so he is an offensive guy. As well, even though he has done a little bit of defensive coaching, I think in the NFL as well. But I think he's one of those guys that we need to see if the defensive mind can come there for the Lions. I think you go to another team that's looking really, really good, that's similar to that, but is different in another way, and that's the Jets. I think the Jets might be my favorite team to talk about when I
Mm.
talk about building an organization, because they went out and they got Robert Saleh, and they've went and done work since getting Robert Saleh. With him being that defensive minded guy, it's super, super smart, as he's went out and he's drafted young players, and he says, I'm going to bet on myself and I'm going to develop these young players, while I'm going to put as much money and talent into the offense as I can, and then goes out and gets a quarterback and offensive coordinator duo that are familiar with each other, that can go out there and be just instant chemistry out there, playing some top tier football already with each other. I love the way that they've been able to turn this Jets team around from being one of the poorest teams in the entire NFL to now I have some of the biggest high hopes for them up into this coming into this upcoming season.
Absolutely. No, it's really an example of two different ways to build an organization, because Campbell and Salah were hired at the exact same time. That was the same offseason. I think the Jets hire was considered the better hire at the time. Campbell was kind of a risky pick by the Detroit Lions, and both of them are kind of building teams in their own image, and it's really seemed to be taking the right steps to get those teams, kind of longtime loser franchises, take them in the right direction by building, from the ground up and making things happen. But I think that there's a little more patience probably in Detroit than there is in New York. And now that you got Aaron Rodgers, they're on Hard Knocks. There's going to be a hot seat if the Jets don't take the step up that they're supposed to take this year. Then there's going to be a lot of heat. That's one of the media, heavy media markets in the United States. And the Jets fans will not, if they don't make the playoffs, if they're not, probably higher win total than even what's being projected right now, then there's going to be a lot of heat on Salah.
Yeah, I completely agree. The good thing is I see that happening. So I
Yeah.
think, it'll be interesting to see. I think, I could be way off and Jets fans are furious by the end of the season, but I do think that the Jets are one of those teams that have built this organization to win right now, which I think is really, really cool to see. I think some other guys that are looking good that are just taking steps this past year: Chargers, as they picked up offensive coordinator Kellen Moore out
It's
of the Cowboys.
huge. Yes.
And I think Kellen Moore is one of the best young minds in the NFL right now. I think he's going to put together a really good offense for that Chargers team that already had a really talented team. It just needs someone to right the ship. Now, the real question is the answer at head coach going to be who they have right now, or is it going to be someone else? I do think it's going to be an interesting change up for this team and be a real test of what this team will end up looking like.
He'll have a real short leash after this year. He's got the offensive mind to kind of help him out. If he gets tight, if he gets super conservative, he looked like his first year, as a head coach. I think he was number one in going for it on fourth downs as his first year. Last year, he got way more conservative, and so if he continues that bent to go towards conservative, and he doesn't, really trust Kellen Moore like I think he should, then I think he could get a quick exit out the door. And then you got to look and see who's that next head coach. who are they going to bring in there to run that, franchise, and super talented roster. I think they could have their pick of head coaches over there with the Chargers. You got to think, though, staying in California, the definitely the team that has structured their team with all those principles that we've talked about, and that's the 49ers. Shanahan is a great offensive mind. He's always placed, the offense in the right places by making it a quarterback friendly offense with a lot of weapons built around them, and then a great defense, on the other side to be able to help them out if there's any struggles on the offense. That's a great structure of a team. That probably the only thing that's really hurt them is just injuries have been just tearing that team up every year. Yeah, Sam Darnold, of course, was a number one draft pick for the New York Jets a few years ago. Super talented guy. Now in that Kyle Shanahan system, I mean, there's no doubt that I think he can play. And if he kind of those gunslinger ways, he kind of puts those in the back pocket and plays ball the way Kyle Shanahan wants him to, whether they got Sam Darnold on the field or they go Brock Purdy, which I think Brock Purdy's the future because just that low, contract being, a low draft pick and all that and playing so well in that system. So I think that the 49ers are definitely the architects of kind of the modern day, how do you build a franchise? And he's got a nice culture going on there in San Francisco.
Oh, yeah, I'm a huge fan of everything that the 49ers do with their offense. I think their one issue is that they're trying to find too much at the quarterback position. They just need that point guard. I think too often they get too obsessed with the crazy thing. And I don't even know if Shanahan's too obsessed. I think he might get
No.
told by the owner a few times, and he's made a few mistakes listening to the owner too often, as, I think he wanted Mac Jones. I think that, talking about he just needs a point guard, the guy that, and that's a great place to be at as a guy who's trying to build a winning program because you need that guy to stay healthy, which is funny because they can't seem to keep him healthy, but they try to by, creating it an easy, get the ball out of your hands quickly system. And I think Brock Purdy, like you said, is the future of that system. But to have the reassurance to have a Sam Darnold, who's gotten as much time in the NFL as he has, is a great place to be at, as well as we've seen pretty much any guy who is a adequate starter in the NFL is going to look like a at least borderline all pro player kind of thing in that Shanahan system. And so,
Yeah.
I mean, Nick Mullins looked like a decent player in the Shanahan system. So I
No,
think,
no shade on
you throw,
Mullins.
yeah, he's in that Case Keenum category. But you got no Case Keenum actually was decent. I don't
Yeah.
want to throw too much hate. He did the Minnesota Miracle, so I
Right.
can't hate too much on Case Keenum. But back to on topic,
Yeah.
talking about the 49ers, and I think that they'll be a really dynamic team, and they, yeah, like you said, the example of winning. But moving on to the other side of that coin of, they talk about too much at the quarterback position. There's a lot of really valuable teams that are building their team off of the running quarterback that look to be trying to build for long-term success, I think, in my opinion. You
Yeah.
got the Eagles, which questionably are building for long-term success. I really like how the Colts are building right now when you talk about like some of those other teams that maybe aren't as projected as many wins, but is in the
Right.
starting phases of building a winning organization. But those two teams really come down to, can a running quarterback, can you plan around a running quarterback for long-term winning?
I think if you're going to go that route, if you're going to say we are going to run our quarterback, we're going to run him even between the tackles, like, it's one thing to say the Seahawks did it for years with Russell Wilson, but he wasn't a true running quarterback, right? He was a scrambling quarterback. Same with the Chiefs, right? With Patrick Mahomes. He's not doing a ton of running between the tackles, right? He's doing just scrambling around, trying to get extra time, buying that extra time to get the ball downfield. That's one thing, right? That's stuff that's been happening in the NFL for years and years. I'm not sure that you don't have to draft a top round quarterback every 4 years if you go with that true running quarterback. And I like some of these young running quarterbacks. They're exciting, they're dynamic, it's great entertainment, and they can win a lot of football games. I just don't know that it can sustain success over a long period of time. The players every year get bigger, stronger, faster, and those hits, I just that's the why the running back position is so devalued. You just can't get hit like that play in and play out and last a long time in the NFL.
And that was one of the main reasons why I have the Buffalo Bills as my cold team that we talked about earlier on in our segments. As I just don't think relying on Josh Allen as your complete run game is a viable way to create a run game.
Yeah,
As I think you need that running back to be able to do stuff for you. I think a little bit of running from your quarterback is not bad.
for
I
sure.
think most elite quarterbacks in the NFL now have at least B plus mobility, and the
Yeah.
only argument outside of that is probably Joe Burrow, who I think is a better scrambler than what his athleticism gives him, kind of thing. So I give him a little bit higher grading than maybe what his mobility grading would be.
And I think his mobility is underrated. I mean, I think he was an all-state high school basketball player. Like he's not an immobile guy, you know.
Oh
So
yeah,
like,
I'm
yeah,
just talking testings. You got
correct.
40s and shuttle runs, and those don't work.
For
Those
sure.
don't work in his favor. But you talk
No.
about overall athleticism, his mobility's really really nice.
Yeah, I mean, and
Um,
and that's yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
so you need mobile quarterbacks to be successful in the NFL, especially in today's NFL, but you don't want them to be your run game. You got to find a fine line because I would love to have my Justin Fields athleticism, but him to be, pulled back maybe a little bit. Let him be just a scrambler. Maybe he creates a few big runs with those scrambles, but I don't need those big run scrambles until playoff time. When
Yeah.
in the regular season, I just want you playing drop back, safety ball, and just getting us as many wins as you can without risking injury on yourself.
You've seen a lot of that with Patrick Mahomes, of course, where during the season he's getting the ball out to his playmakers and all that. But come playoff time, he's going to do whatever it takes to get the win, and he'll go take off and run with the football a lot more in the playoffs than he ever will in that 17 game regular season. So yeah, those guys that are running, I think they can take some clues from that. But you got to be an accurate thrower of the football. You've got to be able to be able to have timing with your wide receivers and do all that and not just be the guy that the only time they can throw the football is because their wide receivers running wide open because they're so scared of them running down the field. So, I mean, yeah, Josh Allen, if there's anybody that can do it, he's that big bodied guy that can take some more hits. But we saw with Cam Newton, even those big body guys, eventually that body starts to break down and you just can't take all those hits. And so, I mean, it's the way of the NFL right now. They just got a lot of running quarterbacks for sure, but your body's gonna break down. Lamar Jackson's another guy. Everyone said when he first started, well, it's gonna work because he never takes those big shots, right? He's always elusive enough that they don't get a good clean shot up. But even then, he's now missing significant time every season because of injury from those hits that he takes.
Oh, it's a tough one. It's a tough place to be at, as like we talk about the QB being the most impactful position in probably the entire sport of football, and you have to have those guys be Ironmans. That's one of the reasons why I value Kirk Cousins as
Oh
high
yeah,
as I value Kirk Cousins because he hasn't missed a game since 2015. Like maybe he doesn't run with the football, he doesn't make those big splash plays that you see from some of those running guys, but not missing a game since 2015 has its own value. And
yeah,
so I think that's a really, positive on his side, being an Iron Man. Russell Wilson had that claim for a really long time, even being
right,
a running, mobile quarterback. I
right.
think he was, an Iron Man as well. So you can be you stay healthy while being mobile. We haven't seen it where a guy can stay healthy while being a running quarterback.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because Kirk Cousins keeps your job, right? As a head coach, you have a quarterback like a Kirk Cousins, you keep your job. You're GM, you keep your job. Like, and so you're going to be in playoff contention, every single year with guys like that, making the right decision. They're good locker room guys, all those kind of things, and that is really good to have. And so when your quarterback's hurt and now you're missing the playoffs because you don't have your star of your team, that's how you lose your job as a coach, as a GM, and that's not good business.
Oh yeah, but I think there is places where it is working the running quarterback. Like I really like how the Eagles are building their offense. I think that Jalen Hurts is a fantastic leader, and I think part of that he's been showing developments in the accuracy side of the football, and so I think he is turning into a guy that you could pull away from the run game and become more of that scrambling type quarterback, that you're that heavy leader, maybe never that extravagantly that amazing passer that's making, the vertical to that like parallel with the field toss 50 yards that Patrick Mahomes made in the Super Bowl.
Right.
You can't get that all the time.
No,
But get a guy that's a good leader, solid quarterback, be that maybe Kirk Cousins type guy, but with I think Jalen Hurts never will be as immobile as Kirk Cousins. But I think that, I like the way that the Eagles are building that team comparatively to, the Baltimore, where they've struggled to really surround that with talent. And I've seen kind of a stalling of the progression of Lamar Jackson's passing ability.
absolutely. No, Jalen Hurts is a guy that you love to see do well. Smart guy, great leader. He's again a good guy in the locker room. Like, what you got with Jalen Hurts. You want that to work. Again, we'll see. We're only a couple years in right now, so we'll see what those hits as they pile up, where that goes. But yeah, I am a big fan of Jalen Hurts, so I hope that he's able to make it work for a long time. That's for sure.
Yeah, and that dude is a strong athlete. When you talk about big guys, that
Yeah.
guy can lift coming out of where did he grow up? Out of that powerlifting system down in
Yeah,
he's
I'd have to
from
look
down
that.
south. I think
Yeah,
it might
yeah,
be Florida that he was doing doing all of his powerlifting. So I mean, just a very very talented quarterback that has been lifting and getting big for lots of years and has built a body to be able to withstand the hits. So that'll be interesting to see.
for sure. And that's one of the things that Tom Brady even shined a light on in a lot of ways, and that is that sometimes you even have to start to tailor off on the heavy lifting as you get older as a quarterback. Allow your joints to be able to be where they need to be as you get older, and that heavy lifting even can take a toll at some point. So we'll see all that. I think it's good that he had that now, so he can take those hits as he becomes more of that pocket guy, and as he gets a little older in his career, everything may have to change for him. If there's a guy that can do it, can adjust to that, I think he's that kind of guy, and definitely be rooting over here for him.
Yeah, he's coming from the powerlifting culture of Texas. That's where he's coming from, other
Okay.
football hub. So
Oh yeah,
just a very,
good point.
very football driven guy, like you said. Coach's son, which you always like as a quarterback, a guy that's obsessed with football. Well,
For
let's
sure.
talk about some of those guys that are obsessed with football, as we want to talk about the top guys that we're predicting for this upcoming season.
Yeah.
Top three guys, as actually Jalen Hurts makes my list as one of my top three candidates at the MVP position. I think he's a pretty easy favorite to win it. Him and Patrick Mahomes, I think, are 1A, 1B when it comes to like who I think could win that MVP. And realistically, Patrick Mahomes, people are going to get tired of voting for him. And so I see Jalen Hurts as kind of that just like really number one prospect with the talent that he has surrounded by him. It's going to be a really fun season to watch for him. And I think less people will be putting the credit to his team and more people will be like, oh, Jalen Hurts is actually that guy.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, that's a solid pick for sure. I mean, like you said, both of us said we're just going to avoid, putting Mahomes down. I think that's too easy to put him down. But Jalen Hurts, that kind of, like you said, 1B kind of pick. If the Eagles stay on the same trajectory that they did last year, he definitely is going to be in that MVP race.
Oh yeah. Second guy on my list was Trevor Lawrence, as I viewed him taking a huge step at the end of last season. You get him a second year with competent coaching. You add in a number one wide receiver, which what I've been talking about throughout all of our segments has been number one wide receivers are super impactful in the NFL game. And getting him, Calvin Ridley, I think is going to make a huge boom in his production. And so Trevor Lawrence is a guy that I could see competing for an MVP for sure.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. I mean, he was a top high school quarterback, top college quarterback. He's a winner as well, because I think at the MVP race, you've got to be on a winning team. Even if you perform well, if your team's not performing well, you're not going to be in that race. So that's a great prospect there. I think, the team is on the rise. He's on the rise as a young quarterback. He's got the right coach in the right seat now. And so I expect great things. The end of last season, he really was playing great football.
Oh, yeah, definitely some great stuff. And my last one, I'm going to go with a non quarterback as my third MVP candidate that I'd like to throw out there. As this guy is from the one team that I could see being a number one seed and the offense not being led by the quarterback. And that's going to be Christian McCaffrey on that
Mm.
49ers system. The 49ers, very reliant on their quarterbacks. They're going to be throwing him at slot back, at wide receiver, all over. I'm expecting him to be a, similar, close to 1,000 yards rushing, 1,000 yard receiving kind of player. And if he could have a season like that where he's, over 2,000 yards all purpose and brings in some really, really incredible stats, I could see him being an MVP candidate.
There's no doubt if he stays healthy, whenever he's healthy, he's in the conversation. And especially in that 49ers offense, I expect great things. And that team, if he's healthy, if Purdy's healthy, if that defense, if Bosa's healthy, then you can expect that you're going to see some wins in the win column. And you definitely can see him in that race for sure. So those are great picks, Eve. And I went a little bit spicier here with my first one that I've got on my MVP, and that's Justin Herbert. I love the fact that he's finally getting that offensive coordinator in Kellen Moore. He's got all that talent around him. He is super talented. I really see an uptick in his play, and he's got a tough division. So if he can come out and play really well, and they can actually make, the playoffs and look good and maybe get to a second round of the playoffs, he really could be playing that ball where he could be in that conversation of MVP as well.
Oh, I completely agree. You add in a amazing freakazoid wide receiver with Quentin Johnson. I think a guy that can take the lid off of a defense, even though he is 6'4", and a lot of people say he might be a jump ball guy. He's a guy that's, he's a straight line speed, take the ceiling off of the defense and make guys underneath open. I think that's going to be a really good fit for him in that offense, as he has Keenan Allen already alongside Mike Williams. I think there's just so much talent along everything with that offense. Justin Herbert's is almost guaranteed to have insane statistics. It just matters if he can get the wins there. I think that's been always what's held Justin Herbert back from being in these conversations, is being in the win column, because he's always statistically up there with the best of the quarterbacks. And I only expect that to improve with the offense improving.
I'll tell you, a guy that has been in the win column, especially when it comes to playoff time, that's Joe Burrow. Joe knows how to win at the college level, win a national championship, and get to a Super Bowl in his second year in the league. His first year, he was, hampered with an injury. And then third year, it was only the refs that could keep him out of the Super Bowl for a second time. So let's look for Joe Burrow, as long as he stays healthy, to be in that MVP race as well.
Oh yeah, I think that he's got some of the best chances. I mean, look at his wide receiver room. Just in
Oh,
that case, you got Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and then I'm blanking on his last guy, but an amazing wide receiver along with that, as their number three. And then they got, with their tight ends, they got some good tight ends in that room as well. You got Joe Mixon at your running back. That defense has been playing fantastic over the last few years. So you give Joe Burrow a lot of opportunities. And then not a lot of people talk about this, is he's also got the charisma for an MVP candidate. People
right.
love a guy that's going to make you like, he may not lead every statistical category, but because he's cool while doing it, people are going to want to vote for that MVP statistic. As little as people want to talk about it being also like a popularity contest for the MVP, it is a bit, and Joe Burrow definitely has that, box marked.
Yeah, he kind of has that Cam Newton kind of press conference status with the outfits and all of the stuff that he likes to walk in with. So it's kind of a fun guy just to follow and see him, and what is he going to wear to the press conference. So that's always cool stuff. Now, a guy that's a little less flashy, but I just love him another year in Ben Johnson's system. That's Jared Goff. He was probably behind Jalen Hurts. He was probably the number 2 quarterback in the NFC. You could say Kirk Cousins was in that mix as well, but Jared Goff, I expect things to even get better. His offensive line gelling just a little bit more. They even got more talent around him in that offense. So look for Jared Goff to have a really nice season. I don't think he can probably win an MVP because I don't think the Lions will get enough wins for that to actually happen. But I think he can be in that conversation right up to the end.
Oh yeah, and I think if they are in that conversation of being one of those top win teams, Jared Goff has to be an MVP candidate. Like that is where it's going to be at because they're going to have to put up some insane offensive stats to be able to be one of those 11, 12 win teams in the NFL. And
Yeah,
so I think, you're right on the money out even outside of that being 11 win, putting up statistically MVP type numbers is something I am very easily expecting for Jared Goff as he's got so much talent there. And then what if I tell you their defense gets a little bit better and he gets more opportunities to throw the football due to the fact that there's a few more 3-and-outs and, not
right.
2 minutes wasted on the clock from a, 75-yard drive that just happened prior. He's going to get more time to play offense, which I think increases his statistics and, puts him that next step higher from really, really statistically dominant to MVP stats.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's pretty exciting. So are we going to step onto the other side of the ball and talk about defensive player
Yeah,
of the
let's
year?
talk about defense. As I know we love talking offense, but defense is a fun subject as well. As we could talk about those defensive players of the year. My first up, and I think this is probably one of the easiest picks, and he deserves it. TJ Watt. I thought he
Mm,
deserved it last year.
yeah,
As DPOY, and obviously coming from the Watt family, they continually, JJ and TJ are some of the most dominant defensive players I've watched in the NFL, and just came off of his the 2021 season where he had 22 and a half sacks. Was so dominant within that season. I'm expecting something similar to that where he can then compete for a DPOY.
absolutely. No, he's a top tier player. He just abuses offensive linemen and he's just got speed, he's got strength. Yeah, he's a tough player every single year. So I think injury again is one of those things that's the only thing that could keep him out of that conversation. So yeah, look for him to definitely be in that.
Yeah, missed 7 games last year. Big knock on his ability to, only put up 5 sacks. I'm expecting him to get back into that 15 plus sack range, right where he deserves to be. My next
Absolutely.
guy up though is a little bit younger. It's going to be Ahmad Gardner, Sauce Gardner, as a lot of people say.
Love sauce.
Um, as Sauce is a super talented cornerback. He's kind of that next one up as we've for so long considered Jalen Ramsey as the number one cornerback in the NFL. I think Sauce Gardner, along with Sutton out of the Denver Broncos, are those two up and comers that are really being projected as maybe the next shutdown cornerbacks of the NFL. My prediction in this is that Sauce becomes that, where he trails the number one wide receiver all across the field and he has an absolute lockdown season. He'll need to do that if he wants to win MVP, as it is very, very difficult to win Defensive Player of the Year from the cornerback position.
Yeah, that's a tough task, but he is a super talented player. Love watching him play. He seems to have a joy of the game when he's out there and just a fun guy to watch. And my guy Bryce Hall over there is a fellow cornerback. I'm rooting for him with the Jets, so I'm hoping for a great season out of Sauce. Help Bryce have a great season as well. So looking to watch those cornerbacks for the Jets have a great year.
Oh, absolutely. My third and final guy that I want to watch out for is again from the Robert Sala defense. And this guy, I actually have a little bit higher hopes for winning the Defensive Player of the Year than Ahmad Gardner, and that would be Quinnen Williams. Great,
Great
great
player.
defensive tackle. He's got that pass rush specialty in him, and if he can get into that double digit sacks, a D tackle that gets into double digit sacks becomes some of the most impactful players on the defensive side of the football. And if he does that, they'll be causing havoc. And so I think Quentin Williams could definitely make that big push of maybe being the next, maybe I don't want to say next Aaron Donald because that's putting
That's
way too
tough.
much
That's
pressure
tough.
on Quentin Williams. But I'm just talking about the last great D tackle, and he might become the next best D tackle in the NFL.
Absolutely. No, he's a great player. We'll see what happens. Well, I'll jump into my defensive players of the year possibilities. I think Hassan Reddick is just a great player. 16 sacks, I believe, last season. Really a great, great year for him last year, and I don't see that decline in the Eagles team. Looks to be great again. They just added pieces to that defense around him, which should be able to allow him to actually get not double teamed and not get those single looks because of the other players that he's got around him. So I see a big year out of him.
Yeah, I mean, and if he can have a similar year to what he had last year, I think that's going to be a very, very fun argument there as you go best player on the best defense.
Yeah,
Hassan Reddick. That would be his way of winning MVP, I feel like, because there's going to be so much sacks and so many tackles to go around on that defense. There's no way I see him as a stat leader in categories, but I do see him as maybe being the best defensive player on the best defense in the NFL, which can get you a Defensive Player of the Year award. So I see it
absolutely.
in that sense.
Well, and then here's another guy, man, just an absolute freakazoid. So we'll go the other side of things. Here's a dude that can just do just about anything athletically, and I just love watching him go out and just do his thing. And that's Myles Garrett. He should always be in the conversation as far as I'm concerned. If he's healthy and he's playing, dude is a freak.
Oh, I mean, freak. He's just a freak athlete. He goes out there, he can run as fast as you want him to. He can pin a 200 and a 300 pounder with just his left arm back. He is just that kind of freakazoid of an athlete, and there's every year he's in that argument of becoming the best. Being the defensive player of the year. I think Myles Garrett is one of those guys that can compete for the sack record, which I expect to be broken over the next few years as we become more and more of a pass happy league and we get more quarterbacks scrambling outside of the pocket. That sack record is bound to get broken. Maybe Myles Garrett goes out there and does that.
Yeah, he definitely could. I saw a video the other day, and he was on grass with a basketball hoop, and he was in cleats, and all that kind of stuff, and he was slam dunking it on the basketball hoop, and I was just like, freak. It's just an absolute freak.
Oh,
But
oh, absolutely. I heard stories about him joining up with a college basketball team and them asking as when he was in high school, them asking him to no longer practice with them because they were worried about him injuring them. And this was when he was in high school practicing with college players. Just insaneness from Myles Garrett.
So here's my fun pick. I loved him in Hard Knocks last year, and then he had a really nice breakout rookie season. Not totally unexpected, but I thought it was a great story, and he just played really good football last year. So I'm looking to see where he could go. He even had some interceptions from the defensive line position. So, and that's Aiden Hutchinson. I just if he can stay on that type of progression, it's a fun conversation. Just he played it in such a unique way where he was just having some great things happen for that Detroit defensive line position where the defense wasn't a great defense, but he just could still continually shine out.
Oh yeah, and they look like they got better DBs out there. You get better DBs that holds the wide receivers for that second longer. You add another 5 sacks to that total that Aiden Hutchinson had last year. I think he definitely gets into that argument for Defensive Player of the Year. Now it would be amazing if he was there because second year player. It's a pretty tough, tall task to
Right.
ask for him. But I do like that pick as well as that nice hot take where maybe coming out of nowhere, especially if that Lions team booms as much as it could end up happening. Maybe Aiden Hutchinson is that guy.
Yeah, you never know. He's a fun player, and after that little singing in training camp last year, we all just got a little bit of love for him. Just
Oh,
he's a fun guy.
absolutely. Definitely some great stuff. I love talking about the defensive players of the year. Definitely some interesting ones. Some obvious takes that we kind of just decided to leave off is Micah Parsons,
Oh,
as he's a guy that I think is kind of in that Patrick Mahomes category of,
exactly.
same with Nick Bosa as well. Kind of
Correct.
just boring picks that we didn't want to select for our defensive player of the year, as those two guys are just so dominant. They're always in the top three. We expect them to be in the top three of the defensive player of the year race, but we like, shaking it up a bit and, predicting some of these other guys as well.
All my buddies that are Penn State alum, they're going to be mad at me for not saying Micah Parsons, but that was too easy. It was just too easy for sure.
He's so dynamic as a pass rusher, and pass rushers are what get it done in today's NFL.
They say they're going to take some of his where he was dropping back into coverage and those kind of things off his plate this year. So you should see his sack total go up even from what it has been. So it's going to be an exciting year to watch what he can do. That's for sure. Well, it's been awesome getting a chance here on Ruggles Roundup to hang out with you, Ian. We love this on the Elevated Mission channel. We're talking about a lot of different things, but when we do the Ruggles Roundup, we talk about sports, we talk about football. Glad we got to jump into a little bit about winning culture, what that looks like at the NFL level. And I think we're going to dive even into more of those kind of topics here in the near future. But great hanging out with you, Ian. Hope everything's going well up there in the North Country. We're down here melting in Florida, but we'll be all right.
Oh yeah, getting ready for that Viking season. That's what I'm getting ready for. So super exciting stuff. You have a good one.